Hello everyone, my name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm. I'm a little frazzled today because I just, over 2 days, binged all 7 episodes of the latest season of Line of Duty. I wasn't disappointed. I know some people were upset with the ending, but it's all good. I think it's some of the best TV that we have these days. Recommend the first 5 seasons. I think are available on Netflix, but so go out and worth watching because everything they're all good. So that was fun, but so stayed up a little later last night than I should have. And a little tag for you today. I think this is called the Bar and the Bookcase Tag. I don't know if it has a name other than that, but it was created by Jalen at the Bar and the Bookcase, which is a great channel. It's a great tag and a great channel. Check out Jalen. He's always quaffing something out of a can and talking about books and usually has interesting things to say. I was tagged in this by Hannah at Let's Talk About Books Baby. Hannah is a fiercely intelligent and really entertaining booktuber and surprisingly tall, it turns out, from our latest interaction. But she always has interesting things to say. Is a voracious reader of non-fiction and loves fiction as well. And her partner Tom is also a reader, and I just love seeing their interactions and seeing their lives together in Brighton, living close to the sea. I think that's kind of wonderful. But as well as being fiercely intelligent, Hannah is also a tragically poor judge of character. She tagged me suggesting that I would be a man who knows my way around a cocktail. I, of course, have never drunk a cocktail in my life, or indeed any other form of alcohol. I drink 4 glasses of sweet red wine on Passover, but that's pretty much it. I just never really acquired a taste for it. So I'm going to talk about some alcoholic beverages of which I know absolutely nothing, and then try and come up with some books to go with each prompt. So starting with an old-fashioned. I have no idea what an old-fashioned is. I mean, I'd say I think an old-fashioned has a whiskey in it, but I could be completely wrong. But it is for historical fiction recommendation. I have here a book which I don't see spoken about much, despite the fact that it won many prizes. This is The Known World by Edward P. Jones. It won the Pulitzer, won the National Book Critics Award, won the Impact Award, which is that the Dublin literary? I don't know where it was. But anyway, The Known World is set in the antebellum South. It is about a former slave who becomes a slave owner. It's a very that's a sort of standing on one leg, giving you a guide to the book, and not doing it justice at all, because this is a very complex moral story that is extremely well told. Edward P. Jones, interesting character. I think this was his 2nd novel, and since this came out in 2003, 2004, since then I think he wrote another collection of short stories, then hasn't published anything since about 2006. I believe he's a professor of creative writing, although he may have since retired in George Washington University in the States. But highly recommend. Not spoken about very much, but this was on several sort of best of the decade things, or best prize winners, and I often go back and look through those lists of prize winning books, because they are sometimes great prompts if you have any interest in backlist or what makes, for me it informs my front list reading. Going back and picking up those backlist books that I never got to, and then often they'll be great. Of course, there are prize-winning books that are absolute trash, or at least uninteresting. But The Known World, I think, is worth taking a look at and considering, because it is a very well-considered book. But it is also, in its own right, I think, a fabulous reading experience, and will challenge you. But it's not a dense or it's not a hard read. But the subject matter in this instance is, I believe, challenging but worth your time. And that's The Known World by Edward P. Jones. The next prompt, 1 second, is a sidecar. I have no idea what goes in a sidecar. Of course, I've heard of a sidecar, but I couldn't even begin to tell you what it is. But a book with a strong supporting character. So this is a book that I love deeply, and came to it in the sort of the worst journey that booktubers can admit to, which is I saw the film first and then decided to pick up the book. But there are enough differences between the film and the book. First of all, the film is one of the films closest to my heart that I love and still adore, and if it comes on I'll sit and watch it through, and I watch clips on YouTube just when I want to have a good weep. But the book in its own right is something very special, and so I love them both equally. The film was Field of Dreams, which was Oscar-nominated film with Kevin Costner. You'll remember the "If you build it, he will come" and Go the Distance, and these sort of. He's an Iowan farmer who hears voices and decides to build a baseball field in his cornfields on his Iowa farm, which he is in danger of losing because it isn't profitable enough. And in the film, Field of Dreams, he is encouraged by his visions to seek out a writer called Terrence Mann, who is played by James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader. He's a great African-American actor of stature and that beautiful booming voice. And he goes on an adventure with Terrence Mann, this writer who has his own reasons for pursuing baseball. So loved the film, went and bought the book. The book is Shoeless Joe. Shoeless Joe is a real-life character who was one of the greatest baseball players in his time, and because of a cheating scandal, actually a betting scandal, that involved supposedly players throwing games, there was a syndicate who paid the players very little to perform these minor acts which would cause games to be won or lost. The syndicate, of course, made loads of money. The players made very little money, and when the scandal broke, the players were banned for life. One of the players who was banned for life was a guy called Shoeless Joe Jackson, called so because at one time in one game he had carried on playing despite losing a shoe, and still made his home run or whatever it does, whatever he was doing. You can see my expert baseball knowledge has not affected my love of these. Lack of expert baseball knowledge has not affected my love of these books and the book and the film. So the story is about Shoeless Joe, and it is a kind of magic realism. It's a kind of ghost story. It's just kind of wonderful. And the character, the farmer Ray Kinsella, believes that his job is to ease his pain, build this field so that the ghost of Shoeless Joe Jackson can get some kind of justice for the fact that he was banned, despite the fact that when the scandal broke, they could not find a single error that Shoeless Joe Jackson had allowed. So even though he had taken the money or been part of the group that had worked with the syndicate, actually no fault could ever be laid at his shoeless feet. So in the film you have Terrence Mann, a black writer played by James Earl Jones. In the book I was absolutely amazed to discover that the sidekick of Ray Kinsella on his quest to ease Shoeless Joe's pain, if that's really what the quest is all about, was J.D. Salinger. Astonishing act for a young author who had never met Salinger. Salinger was notoriously reclusive, and yet he writes J.D. Salinger as a character in the book, has long conversations with him, makes some connection. J.D. Salinger wrote a book with a character called Kinsella. W.P. Kinsella wrote the book Shoeless Joe. The lead character in the book is called Ray Kinsella. He also has a twin brother called Richard Kinsella, and the Kinsella that J.D. Salinger mentioned was a guy called Richard Kinsella. There's all sorts of weird crossovers between fiction and reality going on here. Kinsella says that he was inspired to include J.D. Salinger despite knowing he was notoriously reclusive. He included him because he had been affected, as many of us were in our younger years, by The Catcher in the Rye. And I have a deep love for J.D. Salinger. I know Catcher in the Rye pisses people off, but beyond The Catcher in the Rye, which doesn't piss me off, deeply affected me. Going on to read his short stories, I've spoken before about A Perfect Day for Banana Fish, but Franny and Zooey and everything to do with the Glass family is all kinds of wonderful in my world. So to have J.D. Salinger show up after I thought I knew what I was getting, because I'd seen the film and I knew about Terrence Mann, but to find out that the sidekick was actually J.D. Salinger makes this also a magical and special read for me. So Shoeless Joe you don't have to love baseball. I happen to have gone on and read a bunch of baseball books and a couple more books by W.B. Kinsella, who is monomaniacally obsessed with baseball, and I'm okay with it. But Shoeless Joe, very much worth your time. Third prompt is a Manhattan book set in New York. Again, no idea what constitutes a Manhattan, although I, of course, have heard of it. And the book I've chosen is this. This is Scary Old Sex by Arlene Hayman. Arlene Hayman, I believe, is a practicing psychoanalyst in New York, and wrote this book after during a long career as an analyst in New York. Let me just check the... So she's I beg your pardon, she's a psychiatrist, a psychoanalyst working in New York, but she's been writing short stories for many years. She's also a recipient of a Fulbright, a Rockefeller, and Robert Wood Johnson fellowships, whatever that is. Anyway, there's Ms. or Mrs. Hayman, I'm not sure. This is a book of short stories that I must have been recommended somewhere and went out and picked this up secondhand a couple of years ago. And it is about people of an age and their sexual exploits. Their stories, but there's a lot of stories of people in their late 60s and 70s and finding love and romance and the physical expressions of both. There's a lot of sex here, a lot of hairy bellies and sagging body parts, and it's all kind of wonderful and natural and unjudged. And if you're young and vital and this would make you squirm, then perhaps avoid. But if you appreciate fine writing and people facing life head on and with nothing to be ashamed of, because there is nothing shameful at all about growing old or needing love and affection and physical love and physical affection. It's kind of wonderful. It's wry. It's funny, but it's never at no point are bodies or age the butt of any jokes. It's just the humour of life. One mistake I did make with this book was that before I read it, I usually don't do this, but my mother-in-law comes and borrows books, and before I'd read this, I lent it to her, and when she brought it back to me, she just, I had a little raised eyebrow, because there was an awful lot of people her age and the age of my father-in-law doing it, and so she was a little... we never spoke about it, and she's been rather wary of my book recommendations ever since. But that's Scary Old Sex by Arlene Hayman. I thought it was rather good. Next one, A Bloody Mary, a book that scared you or messed you up. Bloody Mary, I think I do know. Bloody Mary is I use vodka and tomato juice, right? Neither of things that I would ever or have ever consumed. But this is a book that scared you or messed you up. But I've said before, I don't do horror of any kind. The scariest book I've ever read and did kind of mess me up. I mean, I'm a grown-up, but I think if I'd been younger, I would have slept with the lights on for a long while after reading Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Gaiman, he's written some horror in comics, and for some reason I don't mind that so much. So there's a couple of individual issues of the Sandman series which are particularly graphic and scary and horrific. I think early on, issue 5, 6, or 7, people locked in a diner for 24 hours with somebody who can control their minds and makes them do all sorts of horrible things. And that doesn't bother me so much. But Coraline, who finds a door in her house, goes through it to find a mirror world with versions of her parents who are exactly like her parents, but with buttons for eyes. I'm not even going to say those 3 words again, because that image is just the creepiest thing imaginable. And when they tried to convince Coraline to stay, and to do so, she would have to have that sewn into her. That I mean, the fact that this is ostensibly aimed at children, I think, is horrific. I think Neil Gaiman should probably be jailed, or at least publicly beaten. It's just terrifying and kind of wonderful. Blurbed on the back, Terry Pratchett and Diana Wynne-Jones. I know Gaiman was a big fan, and he worked with Terry Pratchett, and a big fan of Diana Wynne-Jones, who I believe that he knew as well. So nice to see them doing that. But that is Coraline. I believe this is the first edition of, at least the UK, the Bloomsbury edition of Coraline. Terrifying. Next, Sazerac. Is that? Am I saying Sazerac? S-A-Z, sorry, God, too long away from the UK. S-A-Z-E-R-A-C. I have no idea what that is, but I believe it's a cocktail of some kind. Literally never seen those letters in that order before. A book that left you disoriented. No. Oh, sorry, I've jumped ahead. An Espresso Martini. We'll come back to the word that I can't pronounce. An Espresso Martini, a book that kept you reading into the night. I'm not sure if I stayed up reading this one, but it's the kind of thing that I have on occasion in the past stayed up all night reading books, and I tend to do it less these days. Occasionally on a Friday night I'll stay up late to read, but I do it less. But this is a book that would have, because it's a short book and very exciting, and it's another fantastic movie tie cover, which I obviously forgot about in my thing about movie tie covers. This is 3 Days of the Condor, which was filmed bizarrely as 6 Days of the Condor, and that is Robert Redford in his absolute prime, and that is Faye Dunaway. And they've in the last couple of years they've made a TV series. I think they released 2 seasons, which they just called Condor, on one of those obscure channels which no one can find in the US. I don't know whether it was ever broadcast in the UK or anywhere else in the world. But this is a rip-roaring 70s spy thriller, the starting point of which is that we have Robert Redford's character, Malcolm, who works in some kind of intelligence capacity in an odd little out-of-the-way secret office, and doing research and gathering facts, and he's an analyst, he's not a field agent of any kind. And while he's out for to get a coffee or leaves the office through a back door one day, a hit team comes in and kills every single one of his co-workers, and he is left on the run to try and work out why they were targeted, what was the information that whoever targeted them didn't want leaked or didn't want known, not even leaked, and he has to solve the puzzle and survive and find a way to get out of this dilemma that he's now in. It's absolutely outstanding. It's very 70s. There's one fight scene where he karate chops a gun out of a guy's hand, which is it's a gloriously 70s. He kidnaps a woman to hide out in her place, and of course romance ensues. It's on the one hand dated, on the other hand whip smart, razor sharp. The action is great. The spy work is spycraft is believable and just terrific. There have been some sequels, I think. James Grady wrote a couple of sequels, I guess, featuring Condor, is Malcolm's codename, and they're very hard to find at reasonable prices. So they were printed in the 70s and haven't been reprinted, or there was some recent reprints which also go for a lot of money. If I ever see other James Grady books, I will probably try and pick them up, although I like to pick them up in order, and I think it's the first sequel is the one that's hardest to find, whereas the later ones you can get. But this on its own, this is 150 pages, in and out, no messing about, and fine stuff that would keep you up at night racing to the finish. So now we're back to this oh gosh, what's happened there? Now we're back to this unpronounceable cocktail called the Sazerac. I'm going to say Sazerac. A book that left you disoriented. Well, first of all, the name left me disoriented, so I guess that whatever alcohol is in this would also leave you slightly squiffy. And this is a book that I know there's a lot of love for this book, and I just didn't get it. And that is A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Emma McBride. And I get the staccato prose and the fragmented mind and the metaphor of the fragmented prose, but I just could not piece it all together at all. If you're supposed to, and if you're not supposed to, then I got to the end of it not knowing what I'd read, or and it hasn't stayed with me. So there was nothing. It wasn't fragmented in a way that keeps me challenged and wondering, and that it just left me a little cold. And I haven't gone back and read any more Emma McBride. And I'm sorry if this is a book that you love and you like difficult books. I know we've got a couple of great difficult book readers. Rebecca Eads books laps this kind of thing up, and I'm sure she only has great things to say about it. I think it's the kind of thing CJ from CJ Reads also loves as well, and so apologies to you both, because this left me disoriented. That's A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Emma McBride. Next up, Long Island Iced Tea, a book that is doing too much. Bonus points for words anyway. I think this book is doing too much. I think from the cover to the author's name, and I'm actually going to read you the opening paragraph, because I then read another 300 pages of this. This is Call Me Zebra by Azarine van der Vliet Alumi. So that is doing too much. I mean, no disrespect to Miss van der Vliet Alumi, but that is doing way too much. There is our author, Azarine van der Vliet Alumi, and I read this was on the long list for the Tournament of Books a couple of years ago, and I found it new hardback. Cheap in the Amazon Marketplace, I believe, and I thought I'll get through that, and it didn't get shortlisted in the end, but I read it, and there's a lot going on here, and it's overwritten as a point of pride, and as I say, there's how many pages have we got going on? 312 pages, but I will read you the opening paragraph to give you a sense of how overwritten this was from the very beginning. Illiterates, abecedarians, elitists, rodents all, I will tell you this, I, Zebra, born Bibi Abbas Hosseini, on a scorching August day in 1982, am a descendant of a long line of self-taught men who repeatedly abandoned their capital, Tehran, where blood has been washed with blood for 100 years, to take refuge in Naushar in the languid damp regions of Mazandaran. There, hemmed in by the rugged green slopes of the Elborz Mountains and surrounded by ample fields of rice, cotton and tea, my forebears pursued the life of the mind. Wow. Another 312 pages of that. Talks about, Zebra talks next about how our father was in charge of our education. He taught me Spanish, Italian, Catalan, Hebrew, Turkish, Arabic, English, Farsi, French, German. I was taught to know the languages of the oppressed and the oppressors because, according to my father and to my father's father and his father before that, the wheels of history are always turning. There is no knowing who will be run over next. It's a lot going on. It was another 310 pages after that. Call Me Zebra. It didn't work for me, but I kind of appreciated the commitment to overdoing it. It's exhausting reading, doing way too much. But if you have a hankering for something like that, Call Me Zebra by Azarine van der Vliet Alumi should go on your list of wow. That is a big swing. Next is a Negroni, a book with a love triangle. So I've heard of a Negroni, again, I have no idea what kind of cocktail that is. Love triangle, so yeah, I'm not a big, I'm not a big fan of romance and love triangles. But then I remembered a book that we read and loved when it came out, and my wife and I both read this book, which is not, it doesn't always happen. And then recently when we went away, when we were in the spa just now, one night it came on, and we watched the whole movie again, and just, first of all, the movie is outstanding, filthy in ways that I had forgotten that I wouldn't want to show this to my children, filthy, except it's hilarious, and the book is very special. The book is, of course, Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding, just a wonderful, as a game-changing book. Originally started as a newspaper column, and then this book, and the love triangle is, of course, between Bridget, the cad Daniel, marvellously played by Hugh Grant in the movie, and the just outstandingly meta Mark Darcy, and Fielding writes in the book about Bridget Jones' love of Colin Firth playing Darcy in that BBC production of Pride and Prejudice, and clearly the book is a kind of retelling of Pride and Bridget Jones' Diary is the narrative here, despite it starting with a series of just comedy columns, actually has a narrative which is loosely Pride and Prejudice, and then in this tremendously meta genius bit of casting, Colin Firth plays Mark Darcy in the movie. It's just a wonderful thing. The other thing is, of course, that Bridget's friend Shazza, who was based on a real-life friend of Helen Fielding, was the person who directed the movie Bridget Jones' Diary. So there's just lots of fun things going on. But there's this wonderful love triangle. Bridget is caught between this cad and Mark Darcy, who is anything but. And it's properly funny, and I'm not a fan of funny books. The movie is, as I say, filthy and wonderful. Bridget Jones' Diary is my recommendation for the Negroni Book Triangle Award romance thing. Next up, Bay Breeze, a book with light, chill, heartwarming vibes. Again, no idea what a Bay Breeze is, but I took this to pick a book from the Bay Area that is kind of chill. And I apologize in advance, I'm going to do another quick reading from this, because this is all kinds of marvellous. This was, if you go back almost 30 years, Vikram Seth's A Suitable Boy came out 1,400 pages and was just a massive seller all around the world, a huge literary hit, just a giant monster of a book. If you read it, it's worth every bit of those 1,400 pages, and highly recommend it. Prior to that, perhaps part of the reason why he was given so much freedom and leeway there was because he'd had a literary success which didn't sell very much prior to that, because it is strange, or not strange, it's certainly unusual. So after I read A Suitable Boy, I went back and read his earlier book, which is a book called The Golden Gate. The Golden Gate, of course, set in the Bay Area of San Francisco, particularly, and that's why I thought maybe Bay Breeze in a very chill, heartwarming vibe. It's a lovely, lovely story. The strangeness of it is that the entire thing is written in sonnets. And when I say the entire thing, let me explain what I mean. Once we get past the opening, we have the acknowledgements written as a sonnet. We have the dedication written as a sonnet. We have the contents, that is the chapter headings, form a complete sonnet, obeying all the strict rules and rhyme schemes of a sonnet. I will read to you the opening sonnet. So the whole thing is laid out, you will see in each. But it tells an ongoing narrative and story of friendship and love. And I will read you the opening. To make a start more swift than weighty, hail muse, dear reader, once upon a time, say, circa 1980, there lived a man. His name was John, successful in his field, though only 26, respected, lonely. One evening as he walked across Golden Gate Park, the ill-judged toss of a red frisbee almost brained him. He thought, if I died, who would be sad? Who would weep? Who would gloat? Who would be glad? Would anybody? As it pained him, he turned from this dispiriting theme to ruminations less extreme. And on it goes. It's a modern story about a man in San Francisco told entirely in sonnets. I think that's breezy. I think it's certainly in the Bay Area, and that is The Golden Gate by Vikram Seth. If you have any love for weird, experimental, but wholly successful works of fiction, then I recommend this. Lastly is A Dark and Stormy, which I believe is some kind of cocktail. Based on this list, I have no idea what a dark and stormy would be. What drinks are dark? Is rum dark? Stormy? I literally don't know. A book that is dark, thrilling, and menacing. Bonus point if the setting matches. So, dark, thrilling, and menacing, but the setting does not match. and this is Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr Ripley. Some of you may be familiar with the film, which was Oscar nominated, and the film has a very specific sun-drenched colour palette, with Jude Law and Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow each looking as beautiful as the other. And the book also spends a lot of time in Europe in the summer. For those who don't know, this is the first of 5 books that Highsmith wrote about protagonist Tom Ripley, who it turns out, and this is the book that we find this out, this is the first of the 5, is probably some kind of sociopath, or at least conscienceless human being, who is all too aware of things that he doesn't have that other people have, that he would like to acquire, and so he goes about it without any conscience whatsoever. In this, he holidays with a chum called Dickie Greenleaf, and plot ensues. Everything about this book, from I don't like this edition, because this makes it look, this is very black, and actually you only see in the picture the sort of the Italian whatever that is, it's a seaside resort. I think the book is shot through with much more of that, and I don't like the black framing here. But the title alone, The Talented Mr Ripley, is chilling. It's chilling, I think, even before you know what's going to happen in this, but certainly infused with your knowledge of what Tom Ripley's talents are, becomes even more chilling. The following books in the series are ruminations on art and greed, and but a lot of the time Tom Ripley spends in his French villa with his beautiful French wife, and cooks things and does things and talks about art, and then occasionally goes off and does something terrible to somebody. Really, really fine, definitely menacing, definitely chilling, and that is The Talented Mr Ripley, and that's all I've got. I've just seen down here there's an extra on a martini. Again, not sure what a martini is, although I remember the TV ads. Is the martini is it a drink, or is it made as a mix? Is it? I don't know. I know that James Bond likes a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred, but I don't understand what a martini is. I'm sorry. And a classic recommendation. I didn't prepare anything, so I will classically recommend Daniel Deronda, because Kim from the middle of the book March was talking about it, and for maybe Midrash, and we just had a little discussion about what an amazing book Daniel Deronda is. So if you're not interested in classics, if you don't read, you've never read George Eliot, if you have no interest in anything to do with that, I apologise, but Daniel Deronda's marvellous, so I recommend it. And that's the second Daniel in this countdown. We had Daniel in Bridget Jones' Diary and Daniel Deronda, and this is me, Daniel, saying thank you very much, ta-ra.